Hey everybody, thanks for joining me today. If you enjoy watching my art instructional videos and enjoy my channel, please go ahead, subscribe now. That'd be awesome if you would. And what we're gonna cover today is just a little landscape. Now I'm gonna do something that's not very difficult and I'm gonna try to break it down for you. I will go ahead and throw out a couple points when doing landscapes to create depth in any landscape. The few key things that you need to remember is temperature and value, okay? Things that are in the distance tend to be less value and a little cooler in temperature, and save your detail and warmth for the foreground. And I'm just gonna go ahead and throw that out there and understand that a lot of those elements I just described will be in the video. So please stay with me today, watch the video, and we're going to go ahead and do this little tiny landscape right here. This is on an 8x8. And I was trying to keep it small and easy so we can get it done. So here we go. Okay, I just want to start off with a little bit of a wash, suggesting where the tree line and the horizon line and the mountains are all going. I have a photo reference that I'm working from, and it was selected based on the fact that I really liked the sky. It was a sunset, kind of a Appalachian mountain type scene. Of course, I use the reference solely as just that, a reference. I end up changing things anyway. I like using my palette knife to mix my paints, and especially if I have a large volume of paint that has to be mixed, like say in the sky or something like that, it always works out a whole lot better to use my palette knife. But as you can see, I'm just blocking in the sky, and we'll work around my light and dark values. So here we go. We're just going to go ahead and do the sky first, and then I'll work my way down. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I talked about how the things that you need to remember when doing landscapes is value and temperature, as well as, the obvious things like composition. And I like to keep enough wet paint right at the horizon line especially, so that I can have that soft edge when I lay in my mountains. In this particular piece, there are three layers, if you will, of mountains. There's one that's very far away, one that's in middle range, and one that's closer. So I'm going to adjust my value when I start laying those mountains in, and you'll be able to see that one mountain is further off in the distance, and then one's a little bit closer, and then one's even closer. And you'll see that very soon. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and start laying in the clouds because that's where all the fun is. That was where the most color was. Another thing to keep in mind when you're doing a sunset piece, that because the light is diminishing in the sky, you may have some brilliant, fun colors to work with in the sky. But remember, the sun is very low. So the colors that are going to be in your actual landscape part are going to be somewhat diminished and a little bit more muted. This is when you're going to use a lot more tones, a lot more grays will go into your color mix. Now mixing some colors, and I'm going to show you as I start laying in the mountain what I was talking about. See, now this is a little bit of a darker value than the one mountain that's immediately behind this one. And I like to try to keep my edges really soft, and that's part of how you create the depth in a piece. by keeping your edges really soft and really keep your values a little bit more softer and more muted. And so you can see this mountain is a little bit darker than the one directly behind it. And you can see that it's also bluer, cooler in temperature. So things that are cooler obviously recede, and things that are warmer come forward into the painting itself. So I'm just trying to lay this little mountain in, and there's going to be another little mountain that's directly in front of it, and it will be a little bit warmer. I think I'll have a little bit more brown and reds in it. And there you go. This is how you create your depth in any painting. Now what I'm doing here is I'm actually adding a little bit of the oranges from the sky that's reflected on the tops of the mountains. Now this is just a little kind of deal. I mean, it's a little detail that I think it makes it just seem more beautiful. You do have reflective light, and since there's so much luminosity and beauty that is coming from that sky, it's wonderful when it's reflected in the coolness of the mountain. So adding that little bit of orange right at the top of the mountain, just, I don't know, it just makes it just wonderful, I think. Here you see the closest mountain, and obviously it's a lot darker in value and a little bit warmer in temperature. And this is again how you're creating more and more depth in your piece. It's time for trees, and I'm putting some more trees in here, and just, and I'm keeping them super simple. I've got even these colors slightly muted simply because the light from the sky behind it is shining through, so we're not going to have an extremely intense dark value on the trees at the top since there's so much light coming through them. But yes, you will have a little bit, it gets darker at the base of the trees. Now, it doesn't hurt, with the fact that I'm actually painting into wet paint. I did speed up this film. Most of this video was shot in real time, but sped up later simply to save the viewer, a little bit of time in watching it. But it's not an actual time lapse. It's only sped up some. So the total time in this painting was roughly about 2 hours. And that's why I chose a smaller piece to do, so that it could be completed in a shorter time frame. But yes, here I'm just adding the mountains in, and I'm using, obviously a lot of greens, dark greens, but there's some umbers and browns that are mixed into this paint. And I'll go over a little bit in the description about the colors that I used in this painting. And now we're getting into the foreground. But I guess I had to jump around a little bit and get up into the sky and soften some of the edges. I like it to be a little bit smoother in my blending, so I'm using I think it's a badger hair brush just to smooth it out up the sky a little bit. But here I am cutting in my little, there's like a bush or a tree in the foreground, and I'm just using a dark value to cut it in. And here I'm using a paint scraper just to cut in a big pine tree. Now, that way I can actually keep some of my dark values without them getting too blended into the wet paint and lightening up too much. And when you're working a la prima, sometimes having a paint scraper does help quite a bit. And I find them to be a real fun tool. But here we go, and I'm just laying in some of the foliage on the tree, but keeping it dark at the top of the sky, and just kind of moving it in and cutting it back in with some dark values. I go back and forth between my dark and light values, obviously. doing some of the smaller brushwork on the foreground bush. Now you'll see that the colors have warmed up quite a bit. The closer you are in the foreground of the painting, the warmer and tighter I get with my brushwork and the paint colors. I'm using a rosemary ivory rigger to do a lot of the tiny detail of the foliage of the bush in the foreground, and just laying it in. And you can see sometimes it's just little bits, and I kept the value quite light at the top of the bush. Again, remembering where our light source in this painting is. It's this sunset in the painting, and therefore we're keeping, since the light source is getting low, we try to keep a lot of the highlights high in the painting. Obviously, I've returned to the background. I'm creating another layer, and I went ahead and lightened up the value in the very far back field. As you can see, it's kind of a little cooler and a little bit lighter than the immediate foreground. And I'm just doing some of the smaller detail work in the piece. I'm getting really close to completing it at this point. Putting the highlights on the trees. Even the ones in the background have a little bit of highlight, but again, I keep them very, very suggested, not a lot of detail. And we're getting close. All right, guys. Now I'm going to start adding some of the detail in the foreground, and I'm just going to, I've mixed a little bit of Prussian blue with Van Dyke brown. I'm going to make some of the sticks and things that's in here. Yes, away. Hopefully, I don't know, this may be too blue. I'm using a rosemary zero rigger. I'm heavily loaded because I'm trying to keep my load at the tip of the brush. Let the tip of the brush do the work. Don't push it, because otherwise you'll get fat sticks. And I'm not really digging the color, but it's all right. It's better to just redip and redip and let the tip of the brush do the work than to try to press too much, because you don't want fat sticks. Also, just as if we're onto sticks here, you can make some Okay, this was the palette we worked from. So I had Hooker's Green, Sap Green, I had Green Gold. I have, this was Davies Green, Davies Gray, and that's that Pyroline Black, which is very much, these are very similar, this is just a little blacker. I had Brown Madder, Van Dyke Brown. What was that? Oh, that was the color I mixed. I mixed Prussian Blue and Van Dyke Brown to get my black, air quotes. There's Payne's Gray, Ultramarine Blue. I have my Michael Harding's King's Blue Deep. I had Dioxazine Purple. Finally got Yellow Ochre on the palette, even though I didn't start off with it. This is just a very light gray. White, obviously. These were some of the colors that I used in the sky. I had Quercus Violet. Oh boy, I think that was just Quercus. That might have been Purple Lake. Permanent Rose. I think this is actually Flesh Tone and Blush in Gamblin's paint. Michael Harding's Vibrant or Brilliant Pink. Cadmium Red Light. Cadmium Yellow Light. And those were the colors that I used in this particular piece. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video on painting the landscape. If there's any takeaway from this, remember to keep your values lighter in the background and your temperatures just a wee bit cooler. Blur those edges to create that illusion of depth in your background. So when you come towards the foreground, then you go ahead and sharpen it up a little bit, and you can start using warmer colors and a little bit more intensity and value. So those would be your takeaways. Again, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining me today. If you're my subscriber, my subscriber, one of my subscribers, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you being here so much. And if you're not a subscriber, please go ahead, hit that button. You know what to do. Smash that button and ring that bell and give me all kinds of thumbs up and lots of love. And I appreciate that so much. And if you have any questions about anything I went over in the video today, Please go ahead and leave a comment. And if you have a suggestion for another video you'd like to see, leave that comment there as well. Believe me, I go through those comments all the time. I try to get to everybody and I take them seriously. So I have actually done some of my videos were suggestions that my subscribers wanted. So yeah, I'm listening. So again, thanks for joining me. And until next time, see ya.